Baruch Hashem, today's daf yomi is Menachos daf Chav Gimel, Menachos 23. Today's daf yomi, we're going to start on 23a. So we learned on the top, we learned Itmar Kometz to Minchas Chote Sheshamno. We know that the Torah says you're not allowed to pour oil or lavona on the mincha of the sinner. It's supposed to be a dry mincha without any oil or lavona on it. And so the Gemara now talks about a scenario where the kamitza, after you took the mincha of the sinner, you took the flour, and then took a scoop from it, and now you poured oil on the kamitza. Kometz the minchas chotesh shamno. You poured oil on it. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Omer Pasol, Rish Lakish Omer. Rabbi Yochanan says disqualified, but Rish Lakish says, Hu atzmo meshachshachol b'shiyari umalel. Actually, says Rish Lakish, after you took the kamitza, you're supposed to mix it together with a little bit of oil that was left in the container. You're supposed to scrape it. Otherwise, how's the flour going to be able to stick together? And then maleo, and then you bring it on the altar. Gemara says, 1 second. How could Rish Lakish say that? Because you're not allowed to put any oil or lavona on the mincha of the sinner. Gemara says, no, so that just means that you're not allowed to place it while it's still in the first utensil, in the kli, before the kamitza was done. That's where you can't put the oil in it. But after the kamitza was done, then you can indeed mix that kamitza with a little bit of oil. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan or Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan challenges Rish Lakish because it says, well, let's say you have a dry mincha that got mixed up with a mincha that had oil in it. Yaakov, it could be brought on the altar. Rabbi Yehuda Omer well Yaakov. Rabbi Yehuda says it cannot be brought. And the reason why it could be brought is the Rabbanan follow their logic. It says Rashi, the Olin. And this is the Shita we saw yesterday, that two things, they go up on the altar together. They're not mevato. Whereas so since they both go up on the altar, they're still in existence. Rabbi Yehuda says lo Yaakov, and Rabbi Yehuda says it cannot be brought. And even according to the Rabbanan, we would say it should not be brought. But the only reason is mishum dein olam mevatlan zetzeh. But in the case where it is with a minchas nedava, we would bring it up. But in the case of shemen and kometz dechote, even the rabbanan, it should not be brought. Rabbi Yehuda says lo Yaakov. What are we talking about? Says the Gemara, my love. Are we talking about a case of kometz the minchas chote? Are we talking about the kamitza minchas chote? The Arv, the kometz in minchas nedava got mixed up with the mincha of the nedava, and so therefore Rabbi Yehuda is going to be of the position that she'eno mino is going to be rabo of levatlo. So basically, the one that is not from the min got mixed up with the other one, and it is going to nullify it. Look at Rashi again. Rafilu Rabbanan, even the Rabbanan, they only say you could bring it because of Olin, because Olin in Mevadlan Zedzeh. But where it would be a case, Vehecha de Ise, hold on, Ko Hecha de Ise Shemen, Minchas Nedava Shadinala. Any case it would be oil, we would put it and say it's from the Minchas Nedava. But if the oil fell into the kometz of the sinner, even the Rabbanon would say it should not be brought. And so therefore it's a question on Rish Lakish. So the Gemara says, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the Minchas Chote getting mixed up with the Minchas Nedava. That's not what this case is talking about. What we're talking about here is Minchas Parim, the Elam, the Minchas Kavasim. We're talking about the Mincha of the bowls getting mixed up with the Mincha of the Kavasim. And so they have different consistency, and the mincha of the bowl is drier than the mincha of the kavasim. And in addition to that, so the Gemara says it can't be that that's what we're talking about. But isn't it stated explicitly, minchas parim ve'elim b'minchas kavasim ve'charav shenasar v'bali yakriv. It says, and Rabbi Huda Amar lo yakriv. So it says explicitly that these are two separate cases. So Gemara says, no, Pirushi coming Farsha. It's not, the Bride is not giving us two separate cases. It's explaining that the first case. And so therefore, it's not a question on Rish Lakish. So now we have a new scenario. Let's say you took the komets and you squeezed out, before you threw it on the altar, you squeezed out some of its oil, some of it dripped onto the wood that's on the altar, which is burning the fire. So, and then we're going to pour komets right there. So do we say that this komets is defective because it's missing, or some of the oil, or do we say chibure owen ka'owen damer, that we view the connection of what's eventually going to be connected on the altar as though it's connected, and so therefore it's going to be valid, or we do we not say that? So isn't this the same dispute that we had in Zvachim with Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish at the end of Zvachim on Kuv Zayin on Beis Deidmar? Amala Aver She'ein Bo Kazayis, the Etzem Hashlim Kazayis. Let's say you took a limb, and we're talking about here the context of bringing an offering on a bama outside the Beis Hamikdash. So you're not allowed to offer a kazayas amount. So, and if you do, you're liable. So let's say you offered an amount that was a limb that did not have an olive size amount, and it combined with a bone to make an olive size amount. So Rabbi Yochanan says you're going to be liable. We view them as connected because they're going to be connected on the altar. Whereas Reish Lakish, Amar Pater, Reish Lakish says that under those circumstances you're going to be exempt. So basically, there's an olive-sized piece of meat with a bone. Rabbi Yochanan says you're liable, and Reish Lakish says you're exempt. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayev, don't we say Rabbi Yochanan says you're liable? Chiburi owen kohen damer. So since they're both going up on the altar, we view them as though they went up together. And so therefore you're going to be liable under these circumstances. Whereas Reish Lakish Amar Pater, Reish Lakish says you're exempt. What's his logic? He says Chibure Owen Lav Kohen Damu. He says, no, we don't view them as though they're going, we don't, just because they're going up, we don't view them as they're going up together. And so therefore he's going to say you're exempt under these circumstances. Or he's going to say, Reish Lakish is going to say you're exempt. So the Gemara says no. It would still be a question, Tibalo Rabbi Yochanan, Tibalo Reish Lakish. It could still be a question both according to Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Tibalo Rabbi Yochanan. It could still be a question to Rabbi Yochanan. Adkan or come Rabbi Yochanan Hasam, Ela Be'atzim. Why does Rabbi Yochanan say that if it's the olive-sized amount of meat with the bone, that it combines the mina de basarhu, because they're both the same, like from the same animal. So it's both the type of the meat. Avohai, they'll have mina de kometsu. But in this case, the oil is not the same element as the flour, so it's not really an inherent part of the flour. Odilma, or perhaps Afilo Reish Lakish, who says it's exempt. Reish Lakish loka Amar Ela Be'atzim Bar Mifrashu Viparish Rav Mitzvah Ladure. Maybe Reish Lakish only says you're exempt in the case of the meat and the bone, because the bone is something that's going to separate from the meat, and if it separates, you don't have to return it. But oil, which is part of the flour, is not supposed to be separating. It's supposed to be a part of it. And so therefore, well, he would say you're liable. Maybe there's no distinction, so the Gemara says teku. So Gemara leaves it as unresolved. Okay, so now we're on to the next mission on the bottom of 23a. Okay. We're going to start on the mission at the bottom of 23a, and it's a continuation of what we were studying yesterday. And we were just to remind ourselves, Rabbi Yehuda says min b'mino is not batal. Two similar items are not nullified, and the Rabbanan say that Olin, two things that go up on the altar, don't nullify each other, but Min Bamino, two like items, do nullify each other. So now we're on the bottom Mishnah on Chav Gimel and Aleph. Shtei Menachos Shalom Nikmitzu, two carbon minchos that you didn't take the Kmitza yet, V'nis'aver Zubazu, and then they got mixed together. Im Yachol Likmot Mizu B'fnei Atzma V'zu B'fnei Atzma Ksheros. If you can do a kamitza from either one, you can see which one's distinct on either side, then it would be kosher. Psuos. Otherwise, it would be disqualified. If you can't do the mincha, it would be disqualified. If you can't do the kometz, it would be disqualified. Second case, kometz shenis arev b'mincha shlo nikmatza. Let's say you have a kamitza that became mixed up with a mincha that was not yet, the kamitza was not yet done from it. Well, yaktir, then you're not allowed to burn it. The imiktir, and the reason why you can't burn it is because the other one that didn't have the kamitza is not supposed to go up on the altar yet. But if you did burn it, zush nikmitza olabaum, then the one that had the kamitza from it, that's going to count. Even though you're not supposed to burn the shirayim, but if you did it, the kamitza counts. Bezu shalom nikmitza, and the one that was not yet had the kamitza will olabaum. It didn't have a kmitza, so that one that brought the mincha doesn't fulfill the obligation. And now we have the last case, the third case, and we have to remember these cases because we're going to be dealing with them on Amma Beis. The third case is Nis'arav kumtza b'shirah. Let's say the kometz got mixed up back with its own shirayim, or b'shirayah shal chaverta, or with the shirayim of a different mincha. Well, yaktir, you know how to burn it. Vim hiktir. If you did burn it, it's fulfilled its obligation. So now the Gemara is going to bring down a dispute between Rav Chisda and Rabbi Chanina. Amar Rav Chisda, nevela. So a nevela is a carcass that was not slaughtered. So the meat is tameh. So let's say you have one piece of nevela meat that became mixed up with two pieces of kosher slaughtered meat. Nevela betela b'shchuta. This piece of non-kosher meat, even though it's exactly the same as the kosher meat, will be able to be nullified, even though we might have thought it's min b'mino, because we'll say she efshar was shchuta shetas in nevela, because since the shchuta which is the one that is nullifying the nevela, it's impossible that it could ever become nevela, tumas nevela. It's slaughtered. It can never become the carcass of the nevela. And so therefore we view it as min b'she'eno mino, two different substances, according to Rav Chisda. We follow the one that's doing the nullification. But the shchuta, if the one piece of meat would be shchuta, and it got mixed up with the nevela, eina b'tela b'nevela, it would not be nullified in the nevela. Why? She'efshar l'nevela shetas shchuta. Because the nevela could become shchuta. So since it could become shchuta, we view it as a case of min b'mino, and it's not nullified. How could the shchuta, how could the nevela become a shchuta? Because it could lose its property of tumas nevela. How so? Misracha parta tumasa. Because when it parcha tumasa, when it rotted, its tuma would disappear. Rav Chanina, so Rav Chisda says we follow the one that's doing the nullification. And if it can never become like the other one, it's min b'she'eno mino. Whereas Rabbi Chanina says the opposite. Kol she'efshar lo yos kamo, he says any way which it could be like it, eno batal. V'chol efshar lo yos kamo batal. But if it cannot be like it, it would be nullified. And he says and according to Rabbi Chanina, therefore the nevela is not going to be nullified in the shchuta because the nevela could become like the shchuta. So therefore it is going to be and according to him, we follow the mispatel. And so since the nevela could become like the shchuta, therefore we're going to say it is not going to be nullified in the shchuta. Whereas the shchuta can never become like the nevela, so according to Rabbi Chanina, it would be nullified. Halima demands, and where says, who are they arguing according. Yeah, but the Rabbanan, if it follows the position of the Rabbanan, but why? Rabbanan just say that two things that are Owen don't nullify each other. But all like substances are batal. So it shouldn't matter. They should either, whichever one was mixed in, it doesn't matter. We should say it's the one that's a minority is nullified. And yeah, but Rabbi Yehuda, and if you want to follow the position of Rabbi Yehuda on the top of 23a, Rabbi Yehuda Basar Chazusa. So Rabbi Yehuda says we follow the appearance, the way it looks, on top of 23b. The ID, the Idi Mimbamino. And so since they both look like meat, they all look like meat, it's the like substance, and it should never be nullified in either case. So the Gemara says, well, it's the El Aliba de Rebbe Chia. So it follows, it's this, Rav Chutz and Rav Chanina are arguing about what Rebbe Chia taught. The Tanya Rebbe Chia taught, Nevelo Shluta Betelo Zubazu. Nevelo and Shluta are nullified one and the other. And this is what he taught. But what did Rebbe Chia teach? What was the implication? Rebbe Chia Aliba Deman, according to whom? Aliba the Rabbanan. If you want to say it's Rebbe Chia according to the Rabbanan, Aminan Owen who do Mavatli Adadi. But the Rabbanan say that something that is Owen don't nullify each other. Amin Bamino Bato, that if it's two like something, it should be nullified. Aliba the Rabbi Yehuda. Call Min Bamino, Rabbi Yehuda Bato Owen. According to Rabbi Yehuda, any two like substances should never be nullified. So Gemara says no. So they're arguing. Rabbi Chia is going aliba to Rabbi Yehuda. B'chika Amar Rabbi Yehuda min b'mino lobato, and Rabbi Chia said when Rabbi Yehuda says min b'mino does not nullify, hani mili the efsher the efsher le'lo mahavi kavase. That's where one of the substances could be like the other substance. That's when we say it's min b'mino. But where the one substance could not become like the other substance, then we're going to say that it's two separate substances and it's batal, and it will be nullified because then it's min b'she'ino mino ubaha, even though they look alike ubaha kamiflagi. And this is the argument between Rav Chisda and Rav Chanina. The Rav Chisda savar basar mitvatel aslinan. We follow the one that's doing the nullification. In this case, the example was the shluto was the two pieces of meat, so it's nullifying the nevel, which is one piece of meat. We follow the one that is being nullified. In that case, it is the nevela, which is one piece of meat, which can become like the shluta, and therefore would not be nullified. So now the Gemara is but Rav Chanina savar basar batal azlinan. So the Gemara is now going to bring 4 attempts to try and solve who the halacha is like. So we learned in our Mishnah, here's first 3 attempts are from the first 3 cases of our Mishnah. So it said in our Mishnah, Shtei Menachos shelo nikmet. So you have 2 Menachos that you didn't do Kmitza from them. And they became mixed up. Let's say you could do. So the 2 Menachos that didn't have a Kmitza, and they became mixed up with each other. If you could take a kamitza from each one on their own, it will be kosher. Then we'll have pesulos. Otherwise, it will be disqualified. So if you could still take the kamitza, it's kosher. Otherwise, it's disqualified. And this is the case of our Mishnah. But in our case, keeping the kametzle michada, since you took the kamitza from one, idach, the other one, havile shirayim. The rest of it is the shirayim. And the lo kamevatli shirayim utivla. And yet, even though the rest of it is the shirayim, we're going to say we have now a mixture of the shirayim of one mincha and the other mincha, which is no kometz taken. And the shirayim of the mincha, where the kamitza is not going to nullify the tevel of the mincha that wasn't. Meaning to say, exactly at that moment, there's more tevel than shirayim, and we still say it's not nullifying it, because if they would be nullifying it, then you couldn't be able to take a kmitza from the second mincha, because then it would be missing. And so therefore, so keeping the kamitz le'mechada idach havei shirayim below kamit vatli shirayim letivla, and we're not saying it's nullifying it. So the shirayim in this case cannot become like tevel, but the tevel could become like shirayim, and we're saying it's not working. We say it doesn't work. And so in this case, Irabana, now money, who is this like? Irabana and Hamrin and Owen who do a Mavatlan Adami. I remember Mino Bato. The Rabbanan would say that two acceptance could be nullified. So it's Pshita, it's Rabbi Yehuda. He says it doesn't nullify. Bishlam Mandam or Bas or Bato Aslin, and it makes sense according to the one who says, i.e., Rabbi Chanina says we follow the one that's being nullified because Bato Havik Mevatel. In this case, when that's being nullified, the Shirayim can become like the mevatel. The tevel can become like the komets. Could become like the shirayim. Because once you do the komets, then it becomes shirayim, and so therefore it's not nullified. Elamanda Amar Basar Mevatel. But according to the one who says we follow the one that is the mevatel, i.e., Rav Chisda, who says we follow the mevatel, shirayim mika avitivla, the shirayim cannot become tevel, and so therefore it should be considered mimbish mino. And so therefore, why doesn't the shirayim mevatel the tevel? So lema delok Rabbi Chia. So it must be that this Mishnah is not like Rabbi Chia. The Gemara says no. Hasam could Rabbi Zera. The reason why the Shiraim is not mevatel the tevel is because there we follow the position of Rabbi Zera, which we're going to say several times, and we're going to get to the source of it at the bottom of our daf. But what did Rabbi Zera say? The Amar Rabbi Zera nemara aktara bekometz, but nemara aktara b'shiraim. The same word of aktara appears by kometz and by shiraim. Ma aktara amur bekometz, ein kometz bevatel as chaver. Just like the aktara is moving. And the Aktara that's recorded by Komets, one Komets cannot be mevatel the other Komets because of two Owen. Af Aktara mur b'shirayim, ain't shirayim mevatel as a Komet. So it's a special law that shirayim do not nullify the tevel. So it's a special law. So the Gemara says, Tashma, a second attempt to prove this case. From the second case of our Mishnah, so let's say if the komets that got mixed up with the mincha, the komets shenisariv, so the komets that got mixed up with the mincha that there was no kmitza from it, lo yaktir, you cannot offer it. V'im hiktir, and if you did offer it, zusha nikmitza alto avalim, the one that had the kmitza counts for the owner. V'zusha lo nikmitza. Oh, alto avalim, and the one that doesn't have the kmitza does not count. And also in this case, we don't say that the tevel that was remaining from the one that wasn't taken does not nullify the komets. We don't say that. We say it's not, but we say it does not nullify it. Now, if it would be min b'she'enomino, it would nullify it. So money, irabanan. It be Rabbanan, ha amar olan hudu amavatan ha adadi. The Rabbanan it can't be because they say amin b'mino batel. They say it should be nullifying it. Al pshita Rabbi Yehuda, and that's why the devil does not mevatel the komet. Now bishlam manda amar basar mevatel as linon goes according to one who says we follow the one that's being nullified, and therefore mevatel have a kibatel. The one that's doing the nullification, i.e. Rav Chisda, that the mevata, which is the tevel, that could become the batal, and so therefore the same substances, and that's why it's not nullified. The kol porte chadil nikmetz, and so you can always do the comments. Mimbamino batal. Therefore, it's not nullified. But according to the one, i.e. Rabbi Chanina, he says we follow the one that's being nullified. Komets mika have tivla. The komets can't be covered tivla. It should be min b'shein or mino, and it should be batal. Him with the look Rabbi Chia. No, maybe it's not like Rabbi Chia. The Gemara says no. Anamiki de Rabbi Chia. Same answer. Third attempt from the third case of our Mishnah. Tashma netarav kumta b'shirayim shel chaver to yatir. Let's say the komets got mixed up in
the shirayim of a different one, you can't bring it. V'imik, they're also a balim, and if you brought it, it's valid. And here in this case, the one that's doing the nullification, i.e., the shirayim, is not able to become the kometz, neither one. And so we don't say that the shirayim was mevatel the kometz. Now, money, rabban, etc. Same question. We're going to same answer. I'm right there. Nemar aktar b'kometz. Nemar aktar b'shirayim. Maktar amur b'kometz and kometz mevatel chavera. Aktar amur b'shirayim and shirayim. So the Gemara gives the same answer. And now the Gemara is going to come up to the fourth attempt, but unfortunately, we'll have to stop right at the climax of this fourth attempt, and we'll do this. We'll repeat it after davening, and God willing, in tomorrow's daf, we'll come up with the fourth attempt to bring Rabbi Chanina, who says that we follow the one that is being nullified, not the mevatel. All right, we'll stop here. Baruch Hashem.